The Buffalo Bills wide receivers have been among the most productive in the NFL over the last couple of seasons. Will that continue in 2022? I'm breaking down the dynamics of the position group today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Wednesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you are joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. We're talking wide receivers today on the podcast, and it's going to be a bit of a different conversation, comparing it to the one that we had on running backs and the one that we had on tight ends. Because the big theme in the conversation that we had about running backs and tight ends was that the Bills have an elite NFL offense and have had an elite NFL offense over the last couple of seasons. But it really hasn't been because of the contributions of tight ends and running backs. And in fact, the Bills are among the least productive teams in the NFL when it comes to getting contributions from running backs and tight ends. Well, folks, the same cannot be said about wide receivers. The Bills have received outstanding contributions from its wide receiver core over the last two seasons. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you've heard me talk a lot about this being a wide receiver-centric offense. Now, it's definitely a Josh Allen-centric offense, but Josh Allen's bread and butter is throwing the football to wide receivers. So let's talk about it. We're going to do it just like we did running backs and tight ends. We'll start by reflecting on 2021. Then we'll talk about what's new and what does that tell us about the position group. Get into my biggest questions now and in the future. And then close with my expectations for the unit in 2022. So reflecting on 2021, the Bills had a highly productive wide receiver core. The receivers alone combined for 286 receptions for 3,299 yards. Those 286 receptions were second most in the NFL. The 3,299 receiving yards was fifth in the NFL. Going back to 2020, the Bills had the most productive receiver core in the NFL. 312 catches, number one. No team had more than, I think, 288. And then the Bills had 3,897 receiving yards from wide receivers, which was number one in the NFL by about 400 yards. The Bills over the last two seasons have had the most productive wide receiver room in the National Football League. Now, obviously, a big reason for that is wide receiver one, Stefon Diggs, who is coming off 103 catches for 1,225 yards and 10 touchdowns. And some people have called that a down year. I've seen ridiculous headlines about how, is Stefon Diggs going to bounce back this year? What? Since when was 103 catches for 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns something that you needed to bounce back from? Now, I know he set a high bar in 2020 with, 1,500 yards, led the league in receiving, but let's not act like 100 catches and 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns is a bad season. You know what's funny? This is going to feel really random, but this is something that I think about a lot. You know that the Bills record, the Bills single season record for receiving touchdowns is 11 by Bill Brooks. I think somebody can break that this year, whether that's Gabe Davis or Stefon Diggs. I'd love to see one of these weapons get to 12 and break that record, because that's actually the lowest of any team in the NFL. That's the lowest single season amount. That's the record. So let's get that thing broken. So look, Stefon Diggs, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in Buffalo, back-to-back Pro Bowl seasons, 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. And he was a team captain last year, and I love that about Stefon Diggs. One thing that I do want to take a quick moment to appreciate about Diggs is that the conversation that we had earlier this offseason, something that dominated our conversation, was his contract status and how severely underpaid he was. But let's not gloss over that Brandon Beane got the deal done. Signed him to a 4-year, $96 million extension. And for all the accolades that we just talked about with Stefon Diggs, that's a good deal. Right now, the average annual value is 6th most in the NFL, and it's 6th in total value. It's $6 million less than what Tyreek Hill got from the Dolphins per season. $4 million per season less than what Devontae Adams got from the Raiders. $3.2 million less than what the Cardinals are giving DeAndre Hopkins. It's a good deal. And it feels really good that Josh Allen's wide receiver 1, a guy that he has so much chemistry with, is locked up through the 2027 season. Love that. I do also want to quickly reflect on Gabriel Davis. I'm not going to go through every single player in our reflection part of this conversation, but I do want to talk about Gabriel Davis, who is, a big part of this wide receiver conversation for this year. And I've highlighted this a few different times this offseason, but I'm doing it again. Gabriel Davis, statistically, very similar in 2021 compared to his rookie season. If you include the playoffs in both years, obviously he had the historic output against the Chiefs this past year, but also he was really good against the Colts in the 2020 playoffs. So comparing the numbers, in 2021, 45 catches, 791 yards, 11 touchdowns. In 2020, 39 catches, 684 yards, 7 touchdowns. Regular season numbers are nearly identical. So I say all that to say that statistically, Gabriel Davis was a very similar player in his rookie season and in his second season. But I still think he got a lot better. I think Gabriel Davis was a much, much, much better player in 2021 than he was in 2020. Now, the raw data is not really going to tell you that story, but some of the advanced metrics will. And these are some of the ones that I like to point to. Number one, his reception percentage, the amount of targets that he had that turned into catches, was up 7%. That's significant. His drop rate went down 3.2%. That's significant. His contested catch rate is up 57%. He only won 20% of his contested catch opportunities in 2020. That went to 77% in 2021. That's a massive jump, and that's important because Gabriel Davis is that one player in this receiving room that gives the Bills that size and ball skills dynamic. Well, if you're going to be a big receiver and win in contested situations. He didn't do that as a rookie. He sure as heck did as a sophomore. Here's another number that I really like. The Bills quarterback's passer rating when targeting Gabriel Davis was 131.3 in 2021 compared to 103.3 in 2020. A big jump, right? Almost 30 points in passer rating when deciding to throw the football to Gabriel Davis. And then I think we can all agree that his blocking got a lot better. So as we reflect on 2021, the three main things that I want to keep at the forefront of our minds is first, that the Bills wide receiver core remains among the most productive in the NFL. Stefon Diggs is still elite despite his only 103 catches for 1,225 yards and 10 touchdowns. And Gabriel Davis, while he was statistically very similar, showed a lot of growth last year. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups, and there's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for extra cash and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Future you will thank you. So what's new? What's new with the Bills wide receivers in 2022 compared to 2021? And truthfully, there's a fair amount of turnover here. In 2021, you had Stefon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, he's gone. Cole Beasley, he's gone. Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Jake Kumaro, Marquez Stevenson. In 2022, you have Stefon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Jamison Crowder, he's a new addition. Isaiah McKenzie, Jake Kumaro, Khalil Shakir, a draft pick. Tavon Austin, a veteran free agent acquisition. And of course, you still have Marquez Stevenson, in addition to guys like Isaiah Hodgins and Tanner Gentry. But when you look at the switch up here, it's basically you lose Sanders and Beasley, you gain Crowder, Shakir, and Austin, and you bump Gabriel Davis up the pecking order. So the first thing that this signals to me is belief in Gabriel Davis, right? Belief in Gabriel Davis to emerge as the Bills' number 2 wide receiver. That's first and foremost. Number 2, in terms of what does this new look position group tell us about the team, is that the traditional slot position is still a high priority for this offense. Yeah, the Bills said goodbye to Cole Beasley and were able to save some good cap money, but they went out and signed Jamison Crowder. They wanted to have that style of player. They brought back Isaiah McKenzie on a 2-year deal. They drafted Khalil Shakir. So while they said goodbye to Cole Beasley, they did a lot of things here to position themselves well now and in the future at the slot position. And so while Ken Dorsey is now taking over this offense as the coordinator from Brian Daboll, I still think you're going to see an emphasis on the utilization of a traditional slot receiver. And then lastly, there's still a big emphasis on speed and route running and not so much size. You know, the Bills are a team that doesn't really subscribe to having big towering wide receivers. They put an emphasis on guys that have athleticism and elusiveness to get open and catch the football. They're not a big team, big wide receivers. And that's good because that's how the NFL is trending. So those are my 3 big takeaways from comparing what the group was last year to what it is this year. So let's talk about my biggest questions now and in the future, and I've got a healthy amount of stuff written down here. And some stuff I can't answer, but it's definitely a question that I want to acknowledge and maybe speculate on a little bit, but there's some stuff to get into here with these wide receivers. First and foremost, and I think this has to be the lead question, is how does Gabriel Davis fare in an expanded role as the number 2 option for this offense and not the 5th option in the passing game? Gabriel Davis was 5th on this team last year in targets. It's a big jump up, right? Now he's going to be probably 2nd on this team in targets this season. And it's never as simple as saying, well, if he did this across 75 targets, if he gets 120, it's just going to be averaging that out across more targets. It's not how it goes. You have to acknowledge that Gabriel Davis benefited from being the 5th option, right? There's less attention on you. Now you're going to be a more of a focal point for the Bills offense which means you're going to be more of a focal point for the defense to key in on and stop. How does Gabriel Davis fare with an expanded role? Now, I'm encouraged based on the year-over-year growth. I'm encouraged on the improvements as a route runner. That was one of my big things with Gabe coming out, was how much more can he show as a route runner. At UCF, all the guy did was run vertical routes, double moves, vertical routes, seams, stuff like that. Didn't really work the horizontal plane. Kind of a static alignment as a outside right receiver. Can he be moved around? Can he work in motion? Can he expand his route tree? Those are questions you have to ask when you don't see that stuff on tape. And yeah, it's somewhat unfair to criticize a guy for not doing something he wasn't asked to do, but there is a level of comfort necessary to achieve when you do have to adopt different techniques and do things that weren't on your plate previously. I mean, this is professional football. It's hard. And offenses have to be in sync and well-oiled machines. And so you can't just assume that somebody can do something. I'm encouraged. I like the growth that we've seen. I love what Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane and Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen say about Gabriel Davis. But this is a pivotal player for this offense this year. I'm encouraged, but we got to see him go do it. Number 2 is, how does the 184 targets, 124 catches, 1,300 yards, and 5 touchdowns left behind by Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley get distributed, right? There's a lot of market share that's available to be claimed in this passing game. Now, obviously, Gabriel Davis, we're thinking is going to gain a lot of that, right? I'm thinking you're going to see more tight end usage. I said I think they can claim 20% of the targets, the tight end room this year. James Cook is going to claim some of this. But I mean, obviously, between Jamison Crowder and Gabriel Davis, I'm thinking a good amount of those 184 targets will be absorbed right there. But the bottom line here is you're going to have a different distribution of market share, and we're yet to see who's going to claim it and how it's going to look. Number 3, how quickly can 3rd and Beasley become 3rd and Crowder, right? We loved that. We knew when the Bills were going to throw the football on a 3rd and 4, it's Cole Beasley on a choice route. He's going to get open, read the leverage, catch the football, and get a first down. We knew that Josh Allen, when he needed to find some rhythm, it was going to Cole Beasley to get him on schedule. How quickly can Jamison Crowder become that for Josh Allen? Now, we've seen Josh do a great job with wide receivers in their first year with the team. Look at John Brown. Had an historic, his best year in his first season with Josh Allen. How about Cole Beasley, right? His best season in his first season with Josh Allen. Stefon Diggs led the league in receiving yards in his first season with Josh Allen. I'm super encouraged, but we need to see it happen, right? Something I've said a few times here, Jamison Crowder. He came to the Bills at 29 years old. Cole Beasley came to the Bills at 30. Jamison Crowder comes in with 96 games played, 409 catches, 4,607 yards, and 28 touchdowns. Cole Beasley came 103 games, 319 receptions, 3,271 yards, and 23 touchdowns. The Bills are getting a younger and more productive player in Jamison Crowder compared to what they got when Cole Beasley became a Buffalo Bill in 2019. I'm really excited for Jamison Crowder. Boy, I need to see this happen, right? I want to see this evolution in chemistry get established. That way, Josh maintains that slot dynamic that has helped make him very successful over the last couple of seasons. Number 4 is what is Isaiah McKenzie's role here? And if you guys have been listening to this podcast, you know that I've kind of had a struggle with Isaiah McKenzie. He's been a difficult player for me. Scouting him at Georgia, seeing ball handling issues, seeing him go to the Denver Broncos and all the problems that manifested itself there, and Comes to Buffalo, and you still see ball handling issues. And he never really claims much of a role, but he's, this respected player in the locker room that brings great energy, and it seems like everybody loves him, but does he actually make an impact on the field? And is he more than just a gadgety type player, right? He's a hard player to process. Now, obviously, Isaiah McKenzie's had his moments as a receiver and a returner. Now, the returner thing just keeps not working out. He keeps getting opportunities, but there's no consistency there despite some dynamic plays from time to time. Obviously, the team lost confidence in him in that role last year. He goes out and has the monster game against New England, but let's be honest, for the most part, this guy has been quiet throughout his career, and even last year. He had 0 or 1 catch in 15 of 17 games last year. And he's never had more than 282 receiving yards in a season. And so I always kind of struggle with the idea of Isaiah McKenzie and comparing that to what he's actually done. I mean, this guy's been in the league since 2017. He's not like a brand new player. He's been around. He's had some flashy moments, but has there ever been any consistent production? Now, maybe he's in line to receive a bigger role, and that will come, and it's more about opportunity than anything, but he also hasn't claimed that opportunity. Is it realistic for that to change this year? Isaiah McKenzie signed a 2-year, $4 million deal. This guy didn't get a huge contract. So what should our expectations for Isaiah McKenzie be? I'm guessing it's as an X-Factor type player. Jet motions, the same stuff he's been doing, right? Over routes. But can he claim some legitimate market share in this room? I kind of have my doubts. I like him, but I think he's really kind of a gadgety type player that's an X-Factor more so than he is, a top 3 or 4 or even 5 option for a good NFL passing game. I think he's kind of an X-Factor ancillary type component. Number 5, is there room for Marquez Stevenson and Tavon Austin? I don't think so. I think one of those guys gets cut. And, Marquez Stevenson, he caught that bomb in preseason last year. Had some okay moments as a returner. Didn't really do much as a receiver during the regular season. Tavon Austin, has kind of been a failed high pick, but still produced at times throughout his career, but he's been on a lot of different teams in recent years. I think Tavon Austin gives you more in terms of outside wide receiver depth and return upside, but I think this is a real position battle. And that's assuming the Bills keep 7 receivers. Because if you have Diggs, Davis, Crowder, Kumaro, McKenzie, Shakir as a draft pick, those guys are all making the team. That's 6. So you would need them to keep 7 to get to either Tavon Austin or Marquez Stevenson. Do you say goodbye to a player you just drafted in Stevenson? Now, you'd love to get him back on the practice squad, and that's certainly a possibility. It's going to be a really interesting battle. I think McKenzie's higher up than both of those players. But we'll see how it all shakes out. Number 6, this is a good question. If Gabriel Davis has the season many are expecting, can the Bills afford 2 receivers that are getting paid $20 million plus per season? If Gabe Davis goes out and has, 85 catches for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns to go with what he's done his first couple seasons, that contract extension is going to be pretty big. And I understand that's a good problem to have. I really do. But how much can you put in terms of cap space into these wide receivers? Can you really have $40+ million committed to your top 2 receivers? What about bringing back Dawson Knox, who's probably going to be a $13-14 million a year player? Can you commit $60+ million a season or around $60 million to your top 2 receivers and your top tight end? You throw Josh Allen in the mix and all of a sudden you have $100 million invested in your top 2 receivers, your tight end and quarterback? It kind of gets tricky, right? And you've seen teams be reluctant to continue paying receivers. How many of these guys did you see get traded? Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, A.J. Brown, Marquise Goodwin. All these guys got traded because of the reluctancy to continue funneling cap dollars into the wide receiver core, especially when you're a team that's paying your quarterback top dollar. This Bills roster is getting more expensive as Brandon Beane keeps hitting on draft picks and bringing in good players. It's getting harder and harder to keep them all. And again, good problems to have, but this gets real complicated if Gabriel Davis becomes a player we expect him to be. So that's something to monitor. Number 7, where does the yards after catch come from? You guys know how I've been talking about yards after catch for years. It's not really been a very good thing for this Bills offense. In fact, Josh Allen dead last in the NFL last year, number 32 in the NFL with 4.3 yards after catch per completion on average. Dead last. You know who the players are right there, ahead of him? Justin Fields, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Davis Mills. Not a good spot to be. I want to see him get to, 5.2, 5.5. And part of that's Josh Allen, right? Ball placement will improve. Maybe some different routes with Ken Dorsey now as a coordinator that are more favorable for yards after catch will help. Maybe Jamison Crowder will help. Maybe James Cook will help. The 2 tight end stuff will help. But it's got to be an all of the above thing here, and I want to see this yards after catch come up. I want there to be more easy offense for this team. I don't want it to always be Josh Allen having to make a crazy run or Josh Allen having to make high difficulty throws, right? Get some more cheap, easy production. I want to see that happen, and I think the wide receivers can be a part of that. But it's not just them. I think it's 3 different things. So those are my big questions. Let's quickly talk about my expectations for this unit. And I think it's pretty simple, to be honest with you. I have 6 expectations for this unit. Number 1, Stefon Diggs to remain wide receiver 1, right? Continue to be an elite caliber NFL wide receiver. Number 2 is for Gabriel Davis to prove the Bills right in believing that he is a legitimate wide receiver 2 for this offense. Number 3 is for Jamison Crowder to become a trusted option for Josh Allen in the slot. Number 4 is for an X factor to emerge out of Isaiah McKenzie, Tavon Austin, or Marquez Stevenson. Number 5, I want to feel the special teams contributions of Jake Kumaro, because I think he's going to make this team again. I really don't have much doubt about that. And then lastly, and this kind of sums it up, and it brings us full circle back to what we talked about at the top of this podcast, I want the Bills wide receiver core to continue being one of the NFL's most productive position groups overall. And maybe that seems easy to assume will be true, but the pecking order here for targets is going to be different. And I want to see it all come together. I'm certainly optimistic, and I'm excited for what this passing game can look like with more contributions from running backs and tight ends, and how that can take something off the wide receivers and maybe even lead to more production on a per target basis, even if the volume's not there to the degree that it's been over the last couple of seasons. But I think there's even more efficiency to gain out of this group. So there you have it. My thoughts on this Bills wide receiver core entering the season. I hope you enjoyed this. It's always a fun time to do these positional breakdowns. We'll get to offensive line later in the week. And tomorrow, I think I'm going to do a little podcast on Wall of Fame snubs. That's been a hot button topic, and I've certainly done a lot of research on this team, having written the book, Go Bills. And I have some thoughts to share based on a lot of the things that I learned in my research writing the book. So tomorrow, we're going to talk Wall of Fame snubs for the Buffalo Bills. Don't miss it. Would kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.